As we grow older, many parts of life change in ways we did not anticipate. The body that once felt indestructible begins to slow down, and the habits that once seemed harmless start to leave their mark in ways we can no longer ignore. For men over 65, one of the most overlooked but significant areas of life where this reality becomes clear is in the bedroom. And it's not always about strength, stamina, or ability, but about something deeper and more consequential. Something that can either safeguard well-being or, if ignored, quietly undermine health, relationships, and happiness. The truth is, the choices men make later in life are often the deciding factor in how they experience not just their intimate relationships, but their overall health and peace of mind. Many men carry with them patterns that were established decades earlier, believing that what worked in their 30s or 40s will continue to work the same way. But what they fail to recognize is that the body is different now. The heart is not the same, the circulation is not the same, hormone levels are not the same, and even the nervous system is not the same. Pretending otherwise is one of the gravest mistakes men can make. And it is this mistake, ignoring the reality of aging and the adjustments it demands in intimate life, that must be avoided at all costs. For many men, intimacy is not only physical. It is an expression of vitality, of relevance, of connection, of still feeling alive. But without awareness, this same area of life can become a place of frustration, embarrassment, or even danger. When men push themselves to perform as if they are still in their youth, when they dismiss warning signs from their bodies, when they fail to consider the health implications of certain actions, they are not just making a minor miscalculation. They are potentially putting their long-term well-being at risk. The body after 65 demands respect, and that respect must extend into the bedroom. The greatest mistake is not acknowledging the need for adaptation. At this age, intimacy requires more patience, more communication, and more mindfulness than ever before. A man who ignores this, who insists on rushing, forcing, or pretending, creates a storm of problems not only for himself, but for his partner as well. And these problems are not limited to physical strain. They ripple into emotional distance, resentment, and sometimes even the collapse of relationships. The bedroom should be a place of closeness, trust, and renewal. But for too many older men, it becomes a place of anxiety, performance pressure, or denial, simply because they refuse to recognize that their bodies have changed. Another aspect of this mistake is the neglect of health signals. For instance, difficulties with intimacy at this stage of life often serve as early warnings of cardiovascular issues, hormonal imbalances, or other health conditions. But instead of taking these signals seriously, many men choose to hide them, to dismiss them, or to cover them up with quick fixes. In doing so, they miss an opportunity not only to improve their intimate life, but also to protect themselves from more serious conditions that could emerge in the future. What seems like a small difficulty behind closed doors may actually be the body's cry for attention, a plea to make changes, to improve diet, to exercise, to reduce stress, to get medical evaluations, or to embrace healthier routines. Ignoring this cry is like ignoring the smoke before the fire. It only grows worse with time. Equally dangerous is the mindset of silence. Men of this generation were often raised in a culture that discouraged open discussions about feelings, struggles, or vulnerability. As a result, many suffer in silence, hiding their frustrations from their partners. They may withdraw, avoid closeness, or pretend to be uninterested. But underneath, there is a sense of loss, of inadequacy, of worry. And this silence can slowly eat away at the bond that keeps a relationship alive. The mistake here is not the struggle itself. It is the refusal to talk, to share, to seek solutions together. For men over 65, silence is not strength. Silence is the slow death of intimacy. Another error often overlooked is prioritizing performance over connection. In younger years, intimacy is often fueled by spontaneity and physical drive. But later in life, intimacy must evolve into something richer, something based on connection, tenderness, and communication. When a man insists that it must look or feel the same way it did decades ago, he sets himself up for disappointment. Worse, he robs himself and his partner of the deeper kind of closeness that can actually flourish in these years. At this stage, intimacy is less about proving anything and more about sharing everything. When men cling to the old model, they close themselves off to the extraordinary possibilities of a new one. The mistake also shows up in the lack of preparation. Just as an athlete would not enter a game without warming up, an older man should not approach intimacy without thoughtfulness. Hydration, rest, managing stress, and even adjusting meal timing can make a profound difference. But far too many men treat intimacy as an afterthought, ignoring these small but powerful steps. And when difficulties arise, they become discouraged, when in reality, a little preparation could have transformed the experience. A further complication arises when men fall into dependence on substances or quick remedies without considering the consequences. The temptation to mask the issue with pills, alcohol, or other shortcuts is strong. But this approach does not solve the underlying problem. It merely covers it up while potentially creating new risks. Dependency on these crutches is not only a health hazard, but also a sign of avoidance. Real courage lies in facing the truth of the body, seeking lasting solutions and embracing healthier changes, not in hiding behind artificial fixes. There is also the mistake of neglecting the partner's experience. At this stage of life, many partners may also be facing changes in their bodies, desires, and comfort levels. When a man insists on making the experience solely about his own performance or struggles, he forgets that intimacy is a shared journey. By listening, by being patient, by focusing on giving rather than proving, he not only avoids frustration but often discovers greater satisfaction than he thought possible. Neglecting the partner's needs is a guaranteed way to create distance. Honoring them is a path to renewal. The truth is, intimacy after 65 can be one of the most fulfilling chapters of life, but only if men avoid the trap of denial, silence, and stubbornness. It requires embracing vulnerability, acknowledging limitations, and adapting with wisdom. When men approach intimacy with patience, respect for their bodies, and openness with their partners, they often find that what they thought was fading can actually be reborn in a new and powerful way. Think of intimacy not as a measure of youth, but as a reflection of connection. At this stage, tenderness, presence, and honesty carry more weight than physical intensity. Men who understand this shift often report deeper satisfaction than they did in their earlier years. But those who resist, who cling to the past, who refuse to adapt, often find themselves frustrated, isolated, and sometimes even at risk of serious health consequences. Avoiding the mistake means embracing change as natural. It means understanding that aging is not the end of intimacy, but the beginning of a different kind. It means recognizing that the body, though changed, is still capable of closeness, joy, and fulfillment if treated with care. It means valuing quality over quantity, communication over performance, connection over ego, and perhaps most importantly, it means allowing intimacy to be a space of healing rather than stress. Too many men let their fears, insecurities, and unmet expectations turn the bedroom into a battlefield. But it does not need to be that way. When approached with openness and honesty, it can become a sanctuary, a place where the burdens of age are lifted, not magnified. A place where two people can meet as they are, without pretense, without pressure, without judgment. Men over 65 have lived through decades of experience, triumphs, losses, lessons, and changes. They have built careers, families, friendships, and wisdom. It is tragic that so many let this final chapter of intimacy slip away simply because they refuse to adjust, to listen, to learn. But it does not have to be this way. The mistake is avoidable. And the reward for avoiding it is profound. Not only a healthier body, but also a stronger bond, a deeper love, and a renewed sense of vitality that extends far beyond the bedroom. This chapter of life is not about proving what once was. It is about discovering what now is possible. When men approach it with humility, with patience, and with openness, they realize that intimacy in these years can be gentler, more meaningful, and more fulfilling than ever before. But when they ignore the signs, push against their own limits, or refuse to adapt, they create unnecessary pain for themselves and their partners. The bedroom mistake that men over 65 must avoid is not about technique, timing, or frequency. It is about denial. It is about the refusal to acknowledge change, the insistence on clinging to old patterns, the silence that keeps them isolated, and the shortcuts that mask rather than heal. By avoiding this mistake, men can turn what could have been a season of frustration into a season of rediscovery. Every man has a choice: to ignore the reality of his body or to honor it, to retreat into silence or to open himself to communication, to cling to the past or to embrace the present, to let intimacy fade into frustration or to allow it to grow into something new. Trust that decides the future more than treaties or technology. This truth may seem simple on the surface, but its weight is far greater than most realize. Every society, every relationship, every institution, and every bond of human connection is ultimately built not on paper agreements or the machines we create, but on the invisible yet powerful fabric of trust. When trust is present, people are willing to move forward together, to endure hardships together, to sacrifice for one another. When trust is broken, no amount of signatures on treaties, no level of innovation, no brilliance of technology can prevent collapse. Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen not simply because of weapons or resources, but because of trust. Leaders who inspired belief, who convinced their people that they were acting in the best interest of the community, were able to sustain power far longer than those who ruled only by force or fear. People will endure difficulty if they trust the vision guiding them, but they will abandon even the most advanced systems if trust dissolves. This is why revolutions often happen not at the moment of greatest oppression, but at the moment when trust in leadership evaporates completely. Technology is powerful. Treaties can bring temporary peace, but without trust, neither lasts. A treaty is just ink on paper. It has no life unless both sides believe in its promise. When belief fades, the treaty crumbles. Technology, no matter how advanced, depends on the trust of those who use it. If people doubt its safety, if they suspect manipulation, if they feel it is wielded without their good in mind, then technology becomes a threat rather than a gift. Trust is the hidden force that makes everything else sustainable. In human relationships, this principle is even clearer. A couple may share a home, a family, and decades of memories, but if trust is broken, the bond begins to decay no matter how strong it once seemed. Words become meaningless, actions become suspect, promises are doubted, and even silence becomes heavy with suspicion. Yet when trust is strong, even difficulties are softened. Misunderstandings can be forgiven, flaws can be overlooked, and obstacles can be endured because there is faith in the heart that the other person's intentions are good. Trust is fragile, yet it is also resilient. It can take years to build, moments to break, and sometimes a lifetime to rebuild. What makes trust so powerful is that it cannot be bought, it cannot be manufactured, it cannot be forced. It must be earned, proven through consistency, honesty, and care. A government may sign hundreds of agreements, a company may produce cutting-edge inventions, a leader may speak with charisma, but none of these things matter if people do not believe. And belief cannot be commanded, it must be inspired. Think of the most advanced technologies of our time: artificial intelligence, biotechnology, space exploration. None of them will shape the future if societies do not trust those who control them. A cure is worthless if people believe it is tainted. A discovery is meaningless if it is hidden behind suspicion. Even the greatest innovations can collapse under the weight of doubt. This is why trust outweighs technology. Trust determines whether technology is embraced or feared, whether it heals or harms, whether it lifts humanity upward or drags it into conflict. The same is true for treaties. Nations can gather, diplomats can negotiate for months, words can be crafted with precision, and signatures can be celebrated. But a treaty is only as strong as the trust between those who sign it. If both sides secretly believe the other will betray them, the treaty becomes nothing more than a pause before conflict resumes. Peace cannot be written into existence. It must be believed into existence. And that belief is trust. In families, in friendships, in business, in politics, the lesson repeats itself endlessly. Wealth cannot secure loyalty. Power cannot guarantee respect. Fear cannot inspire love. Only trust can create bonds that last beyond circumstances. A parent earns the trust of a child through care, through protection, through presence. A friend earns trust through loyalty in times of difficulty. A leader earns trust through honesty and fairness. Without these things, titles and accomplishments mean very little. Even the future of humanity itself hinges more on trust than on technical progress. Imagine a world where artificial intelligence controls vast parts of life, where medical science can alter genes, where machines can fight wars without human presence. None of this will guarantee a better future unless people trust those systems and those who operate them. Without trust, technology becomes a weapon of fear rather than a tool of hope. We can already see this in the way misinformation spreads, in the way doubt corrodes belief in science, in the way suspicion erodes unity. It is not the lack of progress that threatens societies, but the lack of trust in how progress is used. Trust is also what allows people to dream of a shared future. A couple planning their later years together does so on the foundation of trust that they will be there for one another. A community working to build schools or hospitals does so because they trust that their efforts will not be wasted. A nation sacrifices in times of war or crisis because its people trust that the sacrifice has meaning. Strip away trust, and what remains is apathy, division, and isolation. It is no exaggeration to say that trust is the true currency of life. Money can be lost and regained, possessions can be broken and replaced, but once trust is shattered, everything else begins to lose value. People can live with less wealth if they have trust, but they cannot truly live with wealth if they have none. This is why trust outweighs treaties, which are temporary, and technology, which is neutral. Trust gives life to both, or it takes life from both. Even in moments of crisis, trust determines survival. When disaster strikes, when systems fail, when uncertainty reigns, people do not look to machines or documents first. They look to those they believe in. They follow leaders they trust. They endure with communities they trust. They fight for families they trust. This is the hidden thread that has carried humanity through wars, pandemics, economic collapses, and social upheavals. The people who prevail are not always the strongest or the most advanced, but those who had the greatest trust in one another. It is worth asking then, what builds trust? The answer is both simple and difficult. Trust is built through honesty, even when the truth is hard. It is built through consistency, by doing what one says and saying what one means. It is built through sacrifice, by putting the needs of others before one's own when the moment requires it. It is built through time, because people need to see actions repeated again and again before belief takes root. Trust cannot be demanded, and it cannot be faked. It must be lived. Consider how quickly people lose faith when lies are uncovered, when hypocrisy is revealed, when promises are broken. A single betrayal can erase years of trust. This is why those who value trust protect it as if it were gold, because in reality, it is worth even more. Nations fall when corruption destroys trust in institutions. Companies collapse when customers lose trust in their products. Relationships disintegrate when trust between two people dies. Nothing, no matter how strong or powerful, can withstand the collapse of trust. In this way, trust is like the foundation of a building. Treaties are the walls, technology is the furniture, but without a foundation, the entire structure crumbles. A treaty without trust is just words, and technology without trust is just tools. Only trust can make them last. The future belongs not to those who sign the most agreements or build the most machines, but to those who create the most trust. A small community built on trust will outlast a mighty empire built on fear. A partnership rooted in trust will endure longer than one bound by convenience. A nation whose people trust one another will rise higher than one whose people only look out for themselves. Trust is the invisible power that decides tomorrow more than any treaty or technology ever could. It is the one thing that cannot be mass-produced, cannot be faked, and cannot be replaced once lost. And yet, it is the one thing upon which all else depends.